the Carver Loaded Bolsa. I've been flooded by more requests to review this board than any other board I've ever reviewed, so I'm going to do my best to give you a solid description of this so that you can make an educated decision of whether or not this is the right board for you. And I'm wearing my Shred Shack shirt because Billy sent me this shirt and they did the very first review of the Carver Loaded Bolsa. And if you haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend it. It's a great review. Go to the video description below and click the link and you can watch Shred Shack's review of this board as well. Now, when I first got this board, my immediate reaction was to love it and to be like, this is an amazing setup. But after riding it for a couple months, there's kind of a couple key points about this setup that changed that for me personally, just based on personal preference. But again, I'll just do my best to describe it for you so that you can see if this might be right for you. So first of all, let's talk about what you're getting with this board. Essentially, what you're getting is Carver CX trucks with upgrades on everything else. You're getting an upgraded loaded deck, you're getting upgraded Orangatang 4 President wheels, you're getting upgraded loaded, I think how you pronounce that is Jehu bearings, which are fantastic. Those are built-in steel bearings and they're fantastic. You don't need speed rings with them. They roll very well. And you are also getting upgraded bushings. You're getting these loaded knuckles bushings and you've got different durometers on the back and on the front. Now they sell two versions of this board, the CX, which I have, and then the C7 version. So the differences are the truck and the wheels. So on the CX, you get these 77A, these softer durometer Orangatang 4 President wheels. And then on the C7 setup, they give you these harder durometer 80A 4 President wheels. One thing to note about this deck is that it comes with an adjustable wheelbase, which they have the holes on the back, whereas I've typically seen those adjustment holes on the front. So that's kind of unique and interesting. But you can go from either a 16-inch wheelbase to a 17-inch wheelbase. Now for my stance width, I'm running this on the 17-inch wheelbase, which is, by the way, the very widest that I can go on either a Carver C7 or a Carver CX. If you've seen my Magic Surfskate selector formula, you know that I have an 18-inch stance. And so that's important to know about this board, is that if you have wider than an 18-inch stance, right out of the gate, this board is not going to work for you because it doesn't have a wide enough wheelbase for you. So that's what you get, and they sell the whole setup for $279, and you're gonna get a complete Carver for anywhere from $242 to $252. So the big question is it worth it to get the loaded Carver to get all of those upgrades for a little bit higher price? Or do you want to just go with a complete Carver instead? Well, I know what my answer to that question is, but I don't know what it's going to be for you. Because all of these upgrades that we've talked about, the wheels, the bearings, the bushings, the deck, while they may be an upgrade in quality, there still is going to be a personal preference aspect to it that you have to consider that may mean this board isn't the right fit for you, even with the upgrades. And to state the obvious, I think that there's one really key factor about this board that makes it like the primary deciding factor. And that is these unique Wheelwells on the deck. So you can see how those come up like so. And that really creates a unique feel on your feet and on the ride. And so I'm going to do my best to describe how that feels for you. But before we get into that, let me first just cover all these other component parts, starting with the wheels. I really love these wheels. These 4 Presidents, I like them both in the softer durometer and this harder 80A durometer. On the stuff that I ride, I've actually really come to love these softer durometer 77A because I ride a hill that's very steep and it's very rough and there's lots of pebbles. And so the softer durometer for me is better for the terrain that I ride than these 80As. But if you're riding smoother stuff, then you're going to want to go with the 80As, I think. And I do think that the 80As are faster as well. And the price difference between the 4 Presidents and Carver wheels is, I think, about $18, which to me is 100% worth it because these are very high quality wheels with very high quality, high rebound urethane. They roll very well, they grip very well, they're very fast, and they're perfect for surf skating. And also at the 70mm durometer, that's on the higher end of what I like for a surf skate wheel. In fact, that's about the biggest wheel that I like on a surf skate. A lot of guys go bigger, and that's fine, it's just a personal preference thing. But that 70mm wheel What that means is it's better for longer distances, for rougher terrain, and if you want some speed, as opposed to if you're staying in smaller tight areas, just doing kind of like surf maneuvers and that kind of a thing, you're probably going to want smaller wheels and maybe even a little bit harder. The bottom line is 4 President wheels are fantastic, and 100%, that to me is a really great upgrade to have on this board. Now let's talk about the bearings, the Loaded Jehu. Again, I think that's how you pronounce them. Bottom line is they're really great bearings. And to be honest, the one component part that I've never been super impressed with on Carvers is the bearings. And so that to me is definitely an upgrade on those bearings. It's not like the Carver bearings are horrible. It's just that you do notice a difference when you get upgraded bearings. Now let's talk about these knuckles bushings. So my kind of assumption going into it was I've never actually played with different bushings yet. That's kind of the one final piece of customization that I need to learn. So I was kind of under the assumption that I was going to like these better, and I was actually surprised that I don't. Now this is just a personal preference thing, but what I found was that these knuckles bushings are stiffer and tighter than the Carver bushings, which are softer, looser, and flowier. And I personally prefer the feel of the original CX bushings over these loaded bushings. Now, if you're the type of rider that likes sharp snaps and slides and things like that, you actually might prefer a harder, stiffer bushing. But for me, as a street cruiser where I just like smoother, flowier lines, I much prefer the softer Carver bushings. So that was kind of a surprise to me. So whether or not the loaded bushings are an upgrade on this deck, I think is just personal preference. For me, it's not an upgrade, and I would never use these bushings again. But I don't want that to come across as some recommendation. That's just personal preference. Now let's talk about the deck, which is the obvious wild card in this whole setup. And again, the whole question becomes, are you going to like these Wheelwells? Well, I don't know. So I'm just going to try to show you how your feet can fit into this so that you can kind of see whether it's going to work for you. Okay, so as far as your back foot placement goes, it's fantastic. I love the back foot placement on this deck. This is just the perfect pocket. You could ride it in this pocket right here, or if you want, you can be further back on this kicktail, which is fantastic. Completely functional. This whole back foot placement is exactly what I want out of a surfskate deck. Now, when you come up to the front foot though, these Wheelwells here present both a challenge and for you, maybe it presents an opportunity if you like this. But the challenge is, where do you put your foot on this board? So some guys like to ride their foot more kind of like this, straight on with the board. Personally, I like to angle my foot better because that allows me to get a little bit more flexibility out of my knees bend. But when you look at the configuration of these Wheelwells, if you were to ride it more straight like this, you don't, at least I don't want it to be right on those Wheelwells because it's not very comfortable, and especially not for longer distance rides. But on the other hand, if I go up right here to where I'm right in this pocket between the Wheelwell here and the front right up here, then that is a nice little foot pocket, but guess what? Now I'm too far over that front truck, which is not functional. So there are really only 3 places that you can put your foot on this deck. Number 1 would be straight on like this, right behind these Wheelwells. Now that might work for you if you have a narrow stance. Personally, that doesn't work for me with my stance because that's too narrow for me. I need to be further up on this board to get the width of the stance that I want. Your second option could be to put your foot right on these Wheelwells, and that would give you a lot of responsiveness on your heel toe back and forth like so, but I found it to be uncomfortable. I don't like it for long distance rides. I don't like my foot to be on those Wheelwells. And that leaves us with our third option, which is how I ride this deck, which is to angle your foot just a little bit like so, which puts your front foot right in this pocket here, right in front of that Wheelwell, and it puts your back heel right in that pocket, right behind that Wheelwell. And that is actually a very comfortable pocket. It feels great and it feels locked in and it's very functional. It works. So what this deck shape with these Wheelwells mean is, you've heard me compare decks to either sports cars or like cruising sedans. And this deck for me is 100% a sports car. As I mentioned, the back foot placement for me honestly kind of couldn't get any better. And then the front foot placement is a very nice, tight, locked in feel when you run at an angle like that. And this means that this is a fantastic ride for bowl riding. I love riding this in the bowl. Really great locked in feeling, and it has a narrow wheelbase, which also makes it fantastic for a bowl. So I'll say that right now is, if you want to ride bowls on a surf skate, or if you already do, then 100% I love this deck for bowl riding. But what the Wheelwells also mean for me is, it's just not comfortable for a long-term ride. It means that you really have to kind of stay locked in that stance for the whole ride. So personally, I like to jump on a surf skate and just go and ride for like an hour without ever stopping. And obviously when you're riding that long and you're going over a lot of different terrain and you're changing your stance and how you're riding, then being locked into one position isn't optimal for me. I want to be able to move around, and so I want something bigger, and in that case the Wheelwells aren't functional for me because it means you can't really shift your stance. A final thing I want to note about these Wheelwells is, if you turn this board over, you will see that these Wheelwells are not functional at all in terms of preventing wheel bite, because they're not aligned. You can see my wheel bite marks, and those are the Wheelwells right there. It's actually kind of surprising to me that they're using 70mm wheels with just it almost looks like an 1/8 inch riser, not even a 1/4 inch. Like, it's a tiny little just rubber pad here. So for me, I would go with a 1/4 inch riser on this that should take care of that wheel bite. And so it's not like that aspect of it, the fact that the wheels aren't aligned with the Wheelwells, it's not like that's a deal breaker or even a huge deal. It's more like I'm just surprised that they're not using 1/4 inch risers on 70mm wheels, especially given that, like, the very first time, like within seconds of riding it, I got wheel bite. And so I'm kind of surprised, because I would assume that you're testing your own products out of the factory, and that had they ridden them, they would have seen that wheel bite too. But that's what I would do, is go with a 1/4 inch riser on that, as far as that goes. And so then the question becomes, are you going to prefer this loaded Bolsa deck with the Wheelwells over a Carver's complete deck that doesn't have the Wheelwells? I don't know. That's the big variable for me. That's the big wild card for me. And I can't, there's only one way for you to really tell that, and that's just to experience it. I can tell you that for me, I am a no on the Wheelwells. But again, that's only for my style of longer distance street cruising, where I want more stance options, I want some flexibility, I want to be able to move around a little bit. But if you want more of that tight, sharp, locked in sports car feel, then this deck is fantastic for that. But you can also get that out of a lot of Carver completes. The Carver Black Tip, for example, gives you that really great locked in feel that you get out of this. I think you're also going to get that locked in feel out of several of their other decks, like say the Super Slab or the Super Surfer. So for me, all things considered, coming down to my personal preferences, I am going to buy a Carver complete, because I would prefer a Carver deck over this loaded Bolsa with the Wheelwells. And then I would get those additional upgrades with the wheels and the bearings, not the bushings, but for sure the wheels and the bearings. But again, that's just me, and I don't want that to come across as some recommendation, because all of this is personal preference. Because the bottom line is, this is a fantastic setup. Everything you see here is very high quality. It is very functional. It's a very fun ride. It's sharp, it's tight, it's snappy. As I said, it rides like a sports car. This to me is something that you're going to ride for shorter distances. It's compact, it's light. It would be great for a college campus cruiser for college students. But for me personally, if I want to ride longer distances, the combination of the Wheelwells and the narrower wheelbase mean that it's not the best long distance cruiser for me, for my style of riding. Another question to get into is whether or not you want to go with the CX version or the C7 version. And my answer to that is I don't know, because again, that's just personal preference. I can tell you that my preference is, honestly, after a year of riding, I have gravitated towards the Carver CX as, to me, the most universal and functional surf skate truck out there. And it's also the simplest design with the least maintenance. So I like the feel of the Carver C7. Basically, with the Carver C7, you're going to get a looser, flowier feeling. And with the CX, you're going to get a sharper, tighter feeling. But as I know from my own personal experience, if you haven't actually experienced that for yourself, it's kind of hard to translate those words into how it actually feels for you and which one you'll prefer. But when you're comparing those two trucks, the CX and the C7, there's both feel and there's functionality. So personally for me, for the feel, I prefer the CX feel over the C7. But then as far as functionality goes, the C7 is great, but what I find is I have to constantly be tightening it because the spring adjustment is always coming loose for some reason. I don't really understand it. But again, that's just me, so that's not a recommendation. As far as the comparison goes between the wheels, I've already talked about this a little bit. On the CX version, you're getting the softer 77A. On the C7 version, you're getting the harder 80A. For me, that comes down to if you're going on rougher surfaces, I like the softer. If you're going on smoother surfaces, I like the harder, and you're going to get faster out of the harder 80A as opposed to the softer 77A. For my personal preference, I'm going with the CX, and I think that the C7s are almost near impossible to get anyway, so that kind of decides that. But if they ever do come back in stock, hopefully you'll find that helpful to make the decision between those two. I hope this helps you make a good decision for yourself. And with all of that said, let's go take this thing out for a ride so you can see how it rides.